the last 4 years and a bit, I've been really involved with the Seychelles Islands Foundation, which has been an absolute pleasure and privilege. I've been involved with projects, so invasive species to start off with, going in things to plastic pollution, like the Aldabra Cleanup Project. I was happy to work with many people on that. And the last 2 years has been really focused on communications and outreach. So whether it's virtual or in-person events, a lot of more virtual due to COVID.
Yeah.
Really connecting people to the sites that we manage, so Aldabra, Tor, Valimé, Forfenzina, but also a lot of the research, so simplifying it in scientific communication.
Yeah.
Really. And that's something I'm very passionate about, really keen to see others do and just to see people learn. So that's been my professional side of things. And then volunteering has been mostly with the Global Shapers Victoria Hub. So they have the Environmental Youth Leadership Program, which I was coordinating up to now. I had to let go, obviously, because making a change and move, but it's in great hands, and that really equips the next generation of environmentally conscious leaders to take climate action in their communities. So getting them out to places like Silhouette or to the landfill, talking to environmental leaders. So that's been a big part, and Global Shapers does a lot more, but I won't get into it now. And the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, I've been doing a couple of projects with them, being part of their Youth Policy Advisory Council, so contributing to international documents, instigating dialogues around deep sea bed mining in Seychelles and in the region.
Is that something that's currently happening here or going to?
I think on Seychelles' list of priorities, it's not the topmost.
Yeah.
In the region, it's quite interesting. I mean, the moves that maybe Mauritius is interested in. I mean, we share the joint maritime area with them. I think it's something the Seychelles shouldn't be prioritizing at the very moment, but it shouldn't be something that just appears out of nowhere. We should be following it. So in the world and in the regions, there are various countries and the various companies that are presenting the deep sea and the minerals that are found in it as the solution to the renewable energy transition that we need. And most scientists will tell you that is not needed, and that we know so little about the deep sea that if we start messing around down there, exactly, we've already seen what happens to landmines. So why are we going to 2,000 kilometers? Exactly. Yeah, so that's some discussion I've wanted to have with people.
That's super interesting. I didn't even know that was in the works, or possibly in the works for Seychelles. Mining for resources, right? Minerals and...
So I mean, like you have coltan, things like copper, precious materials that go into batteries, into your computer. I mean, the truth of the matter is, there's trillions of dollars worth of these things. And we're getting to a point where, the deep sea is anything about 200 meters below sea level, so down. And so we're getting the technology to finally get there. But you have to ask yourself how much of these materials are being wasted and dumped into landfill. I mean, somewhere like the EU, they only recycle 5% of these things. So that's gold, that's copper, that's coltan. There's a lot of things, and you're thinking, why are we dumping these things? So there's a whole move towards what people are calling, a circular economy. You never have waste in that sense. You really try as much as possible to ensure materials, or even energy actually, doesn't just end up in the environment causing damage now or later. So that's...
Yeah, and having to take less from nature again and again.
Exactly, yeah. Learning from nature, right? Nature doesn't exactly just say, oh, we're not using this bit.
So what actually sent you on this journey? Why did you choose conservation, and in Seychelles particularly?
I guess in Seychelles, it's you're surrounded by the natural beauty. I mean, my parents were people who were always outdoors, hiking. I mean, in terms of their work, one being a farmer, the other being an artist. So I think it was always natural beauty, the botanics, the seascapes. All these things were definitely part of my childhood. And I didn't really necessarily think about conservation first. I was more, when it comes to A-levels, I took like history, economics, and then a bit like biology, which allowed me to carry on with conservation later in English. I was really more written work and reading and all that kind of stuff. But then I think being afforded the chance to go to Aldabra made me really understand that not just Seychelles, but the world and all these things that are there are astounding. And it's quite a sad realization, but you start realizing these are things that were there and were disappearing over time. So what was on Aldabra in terms of birds or in terms of, fish and the abundance of life, that should be over here in some capacity, and 250 years ago, X amount of time, we started getting rid of these things. So realizing that and having a passion for politics, international relations specifically, somewhere like Aldabra, which is really a gift to humanity. It's really something that's come from a national commitment and an international support.
Yeah.
Seeing things like humpback whales jump out of the water and breach, and land. I mean, it's 15-ton mammal just coming out of the ocean and just landing on that.
On Aldabra? That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, flamingos, dugongs, it can go on.
Wow.
But when you see stuff like that, you think, I don't want to end up just,
Losing
not...
it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you feel connected to it.
So you wanted to basically just make sure that Seychelles is preserved in some ways.
Yeah, I definitely want to be part of the solution, and very selfishly, I want to go out and see it.
Of
I think
course.
it's the right and privilege of Seychelles to live in this country and experience the nature, and by experiencing it, you can help it rather than destroy it. I think that's the thing we need to understand. We can go out and help it rather than just be not connected to it and just, people think about the meat they eat or anything like that. We don't realize where it's coming from, and we realize we can make choices actually choosing a different type of meat or forgetting about meat altogether. These are the things that it makes me think, okay, because I had that chance, and maybe others can have that chance, we can really connect with what's ours and treat it better.
Nice, that's a beautiful concept. Have you been supported on your journey?
Very much so. I think from family members, that's always been easy to get that support. And from what I would say chosen family, whether it's work colleagues, I've had great mentors. I mean, Dr. Frauke Fleischer-Dogle, she's an amazing character. I have people like Dr. Nancy Bunbury, Christina Quans, colleagues younger than me, my age. It's about getting along and figuring out big problems and breaking them down. I mean, we talk about climate change and how Seychelles is meant to adapt and mitigate this issue.
Yeah.
And you think it's impossible. You realize there's certain small, I would call it actions that lead to, bigger things. And it's not solved yet, but you don't lose hope because you see others are coming forward. And a lot more is needed, but you don't feel alone. I think that's key. I mean, I live with someone like Victoria, with Rosetta Alcindor. These are all people our age who are going out and doing it, and yourself actually as well.
In a different way, but yeah.
No, but you connect to nature, you bring people out, and people appreciate that. So as long as that happens.
Has the government helped you, supported you, made the journey easy for you?
Yeah, I think my experience, and I think it's one where I've been, through SIF, but also through the volunteering stuff I do, attending conferences, I've been able to apply to things and then have the government meet me on the other side in that sense. Also, it's interesting because I think in Seychelles, we're so much more closer to the government. So, for example, Victoria and I basically organized a local conference on youth before the pre-COP that we were attending in September. And I think we had 95% attendance from, the people invited. I mean, these are PSCs, these are CEOs, these are people with a lot more things to do, but they made time for youth and climate change. And so in that and other examples, I can say people turned up and came forward. I don't know if that's the case for everybody in Seychelles. I don't think it always is, actually. I think that's a discussion. Sometimes I can definitely see it, the same names come up. So they think of Jeremy this time, and I'm like, but there are more people out there. And there's only so much one person can do.
Of course.
And maybe, there are better suited people. So I think there's a discussion about how opportunities are shared, or maybe how we think of youth and how we think of people. But supported, definitely.
And how do you think that opportunities are shared? Do you think that there is a pool of people that are favored and it's sort of recycled and it's hard for certain people or the new generation to break into that circle?
Yeah, I'm turning 28 this year, and I think we've lived through some interesting political upheavals.
Oh, yes.
And so I think we don't live in a system that we lived in before, where I think people were a certain family name. If you didn't vote for that party, you were not being considered end-of-story. So I don't think we live in that moment now. I think there's a lot more movement in terms of where people can aspire, as well as where people, if there are issues, people can probably come forward and speak about it. So I think there's a transition there. I think in terms of what's happening now, it's a case of who's coming to mind, who's making a lot of noise, who's easily, visible. And I think it's always easy to come and see someone who's visible and take that person forward. But maybe we need to do a bit more digging. Maybe we need to find a lot more people. And that's the government side or whichever organization side of things. But then in terms of youth, it's also about us being maybe a bit more vocal, a bit more demanding, maybe strategic as well. This is the game. If you want change, I think it's about understanding how do we make ourselves unavoidable, not noticeable, So
I've noticed that social media plays a huge role in that lately in Seychelles. There's a lot of people who are using those platforms to make noise, and I find that really interesting because obviously there is the political change that's happened in the country, but there is also the boom of social media use. I wonder how much influence both of these things have and to what degree. It's interesting.
I mean, working 2 years with SIF Communications and doing a project around climate change, communications will change. I have to first say communication matters. You need to show people what's going on. And if they understand it or if they see where they can become part of it, then there's no excuse not to see people being involved. And you do see people more and more involved. But it's so hard to measure that. It's so hard to be like or that view has meant this person has done this or given up that. But in saying that, I think that's the thing. It's a tool.
Yeah.
And one tool works for one group of people or another. So social media, maybe in our age group, I think there's a lot of habits or knowledge or whatever that's shared, and you can see various circles or factions take those things on and bring them forward, and not just for environment. I mean, for women's issues, for speaking out, exactly. So there's a lot of things. Social inclusiveness that's coming to the forefront now because of social media. But then I think of I'd say your 40 to 60 demographic. Unless you go to SBC, unless you're on the radio, you're not reaching, maybe you might be on social media, but you're not getting into that group. And I think that's the divisions are still there. And I think we need to, if you want to reach everybody, it's about really, and that's the thing, it's about knowing who do you want to reach firstly and saying this is the tool that's going to get them and this is going to be the one that invites them to see you in person. Because we have this amazing privilege in Seychelles where takes 5 minutes, maybe an hour max, you can meet that person on this island without too much of a hassle.
True.
So as long as social media can bring someone to the beach and they can clean up waste, or if they can go to a protest and make their voices heard, I think that's what social media, it shouldn't just be the conversation that exists on the cloud. It needs to now start moving into that physical, exactly.
Okay, interesting. So what do you think about NGOs in Seychelles? Because you volunteered on quite a few different NGOs, correct?
Yeah, so Global Shapers is a youth-led and managed NGO. It's completely youth, so 18 to 30.
Yeah.
And my experience is there, we have, what's the word? We have a strong sense of we cannot mess this up.
Yeah.
For the behalf of young people. Young people have to prove themselves, and I'm not saying there's no proper reasons why those things exist, but we do feel a certain sense that if we don't have an accounts in order, if we don't have transparency and accountability amongst ourselves, the trust is gone. And I think that's the Seychelles that we live in, that there's been a lot of, whether truth or not, but a lot of issues around corruption and unaccountability. And so in my experience with somewhere like the Hub, I've realized how it's hard to always be accountable, but it's necessary to be accountable. And you go through 15 steps instead of the one step that makes life easier. So in terms of NGOs in Seychelles, I've heard many things. And I think, people being able to take grants and pay themselves quite a large sum out of that is something I've definitely come across. Have I got the evidence to back that up? No. But it's interesting because we're such a small community, and in communities, whether it's environment or whether it's another sector, people talk.
How do you hold them accountable?
So, I mean, it's always about where these funds come from and knowing that if a donor's aware of this or not. I think that's key, because the donor should be able to ask, for audit, any kind of report needed from these to say, okay, you had X amount of funds and they went to what. If the donor is aware that maybe someone's paying themselves too much, then it's on to the donor to say that's possible, not possible. And maybe as us, as a community, we can say, look, that doesn't make sense to us. Maybe that's a discussion of a specific donor saying, well, does that still make sense? And then they need to justify that. In terms of conservation and environment being used as a tool, we talk about greenwashing, but I see politicians, past and present, it's a very trendy thing to have. And it takes away from maybe corruption that's been, I've seen, politicians, especially in Seychelles, and you look at the former regime, we have very strong conservation legacy, but then we've seen what's happened in terms of human rights abuses, in terms of corruption. This allowed a lot of distraction from certain things. It lessened that blow in that sense, right? And I think that's something we have to be aware of as we go forward. And I don't know, for me, one of the biggest issues, and I think when we think about the Ensemble project, we both were not happy to see that go ahead because of the lack of consultation with the community in the second phase. You have to ask yourself these environmental impact assessments and the consultants taking part in those. I think that's also a big part of it, because you see there's a lot of money in this space, whether it's from a hotel development, whether it's for a grant being carried out. And you have to ask yourself, what is the motivation for someone to be part of this? Are they actually here for the conservation, for the sustainability, or are they here to enrich themselves? And I think that's something that maybe, that, again, discussions with donors, discussion with the government, and not just discussions, but actually, like, we've seen this happen X amount of times, we're not allowing this to happen again. The repercussions.
And is there a board or a governing body that actually handles that kind of thing?
As I understand, so the donors, in that sense, if it's government, I mean, the Ministry of Finance should have some kind of, I know they had, for the CSR, they had a committee that basically approved CSR, and I know that's something that's basically being phased out now. So I don't know if the Ministry of Finance, there's several different grants and things.
But there's not a governing body that sort of makes sure to check out
environmentalists specifically?
Well, NGOs in general, but yes, environment could be one category, for example.
I think within the environment, if I'm not mistaken, there's a national executive community, and I know they are aware of what's going on in the country in terms of funding and everything like this, whether it's for climate adaptation or for, various things. I mean, I think one of those bits that we might get to is fisheries, where we've got something like 200,000 euros each year out of this, which is a tiny percentage of what's there, but it's meant to be going towards environmental protection, or it's kind of shut up money.
I'm happy that you brought that up. I really would love to know, what are your thoughts on the fishing situation in Seychelles?
I mean, in that case, that's such little money too late. If we're talking about a $300 million industry each year, I mean, it's one of the things that we need to understand. Firstly, it accounts for something like the tuna, the industrial fisheries. It accounts for something like 80% of our hard exports. So containers come into this country for all our food and our, consumer items, and they would leave empty if we did not have tuna being caught and landed in our waters at Port Victoria. So we know we can't exist as we are without this industry. So that's the first thing, and we have to understand.
What would it mean for us? What would actually happen if we did exist without that industry?
I think immediately the cost of living would go up. Some people say would double or go further. You're looking at, because if you're leaving with an empty container, you're still paying for the empty container. So there's no money coming in on that thing. So you'd see life become extremely, cost of living is already an issue for so many people. So immediately you see food prices and other consumer items go up. I think it's also in terms of not just tuna, but maybe longlining, all these kind of things are supporting each other. So the whole ecosystem around fisheries here is one where, whether it's skippers or whether it's particular kind of skilled workers, without that job, without them bringing in the income, many families would suffer. But the issue is, are we going to carry on as it is? Because it's not that we don't need it and it shouldn't be happening. It's, do we carry on in a way that is unsustainable? Do we carry on in a way that's exploitative and unequal? That's the question, because I think we do need to understand that this is our resources and we need to manage it not for the next 5 or 10 years, but for the next 100, 500 years. And the things like with climate change, with the changing of currents, the acidification and sea temperature going up, that these types of species, whether it's tuna or even some of the more, the residential, non-migratory species, they could also be things we lose in the next couple of years or even decades. So for me, it's a case of saying that the fisheries right now, we're seeing that the EU has this sustainable fisheries agreement that we've just signed, and I think it's valid for 6 years. We see quite a lot of money put into that. But in terms of how much...
But is that just fancy and good looking on paper, or is that actually making a difference to our oceans?
So we're getting money. That's the big thing.
So it's a money thing.
It's a money. I mean, an economy needs to drive.
Yeah.
But do we need to sell it like this? No. The EU has been in our water since the 80s. Somewhere like Aldabra, which is special reserve, other locations that are protected and not meant to be. Somewhere like Sadler has over 500 tons of plastic pollution there, of which 83% of it comes from ghost gear. And how much of that comes from the personas in our waters is up for question, but a lot of it does. It's undeniable. We see fish aggregating devices, fads, buoys, all these things linked to the semi-industrial and industrial fisheries in this country. And when we see 200,000 euros a year, that's only going to take off 25 tons, at least from what we've experienced with Aldabra. That's just one island. So just from plastic pollution, never mind bycatch, never mind there's illegal things that are going on. I mean, Blue Ocean Mine, basically, they did the whole report of the Western Indian Ocean, which found there were Spanish and French vessels basically turning off their tracking for 500 days, so over a year. So we weren't even sure what's happening to the fish they've been caught. They could be brought to other places like Mombasa or elsewhere, not Port Victoria. So there's a lot of things that within our waters these things are wild, wild west, you know.
It is the wild, wild
Yeah.
west. That's why, for me, when I hear or read about all the agreements being signed and this and that, it just feels like it's smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, it's a case of unequal relationships. Some people call it neo-colonial. I would go so far as well, because I think if you look at it, we are able to, within the smaller states that are, you know, it's the largest market in the world, the EU, and they've got incredible unequal power based on their wealth and size. And so, you know, Seychelles, we get a better deal than maybe Mauritius in terms of how much per ton we sell our tuna, but it's 83 euros per ton versus 60 something or 50 something. And when you start doing that on per kilo, you realize this is very small figures. And you also start realizing, so I was just saying, it's $300 million we get a year from the canning of tuna. But when you look at the longline industry, I mean, I think, so the purse seiners, they take about 50,000 tons a year, something like this. The semi-industrial, it's under 10,000. It's more like 5,000 tons. And we generate $80 million from that. Versus, you know, 300 million at 50,000, 5,000 at 80 million. So you tell me, you know, there's value added products that we need to think about. Are we always going to just can this? Is it benefiting people in Europe or people here who are canning or whatever, more than it could be benefiting maybe smaller boats that are going out there, being more specific in terms of what they're catching? You know, there's issues about why are we only exporting maybe to the European market, maybe the Japanese market, maybe there's other markets that we need to consider. How is this helping other things like tourism? I mean, if a flight or boat or whatever's moving product within the country, outside of the country, how is this, you know, maybe going out in a more equitable way? And for me, we say blue economy, but this is a great example of where maybe the blue economy is not, you know, it's very, you know, as someone would say, it's an old bottle of wine with a new label on it.
Yeah.
And it's one where, you know, we're repackaging this thing, but the hypocrisy is rife. I mean, you know, in terms of illegal things as well, there's a lot of people who I think are quite high up or quite powerful who do illegal things like exploit turtles.
Yeah.
And then when you see there's other people who are not having the same clout or whatever, they also do it, and it's a problem. And I don't justify the exploitation of turtles by anyone, given how fragile that species is. But you do see that if the small person is being persecuted and the bigger person is not, then it's an issue of justice.
And I mean, the big boats with their bycatch, they're not being persecuted. So it's so hard to tell people of a country, hey, listen, you know, you got to abide by this and this and this. But
so that's power at play, right? There's an asymmetry. You have to ask yourself, well, okay, the local fisherman is providing for the community, for his family, and that is good. But then for the national economy, the macro picture, you know, these guys are seen as essential, right? Because it's that if they don't have exports of tuna, so it seems like there's an untouchability about it, and I think that's where the government, I think that's where the government is realizing that we're in this chokehold, or not realizing, they've always known we're in this chokehold with this unequal relationship, and I think because of certain projects, because of certain noise, they are starting to put these little bits of money to kind of make it seem that the things are can be compensated for, when we realize no, they can't be, that there's a lot more money that should be involved, or a lot more support, or not even doing these things in the first place.
And also, how do you regulate that industry?
I mean, it's self-regulated at the moment with observers on it, and
they get thrown off board apparently.
So exactly, and what happens out there. So, you know, that's the thing. A small country like Seychelles, and our capacity to stand up to big companies, to large trading blocks, it's not easy. And I look at the people in our negotiating chairs at the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission. You're meeting lawyers with 25 years of experience who are in a team of 50, and you're just one or two of you, right? So I don't think it's an easy job, but I think and I don't want to focus just on the negative. I do like to be solution oriented, and I think that's where, you know, you've got countries like Sri Lanka, Maldives, Kenya recently at the last IOTC, they stood up and asked about really following the scientific recommendations, and I think that's where we need to really start paying attention. I mean, someone else I'd really advise and suggest as the next guest to go specific on this is Sheena Talma.
Okay. And
she's got a background in fisheries and is doing amazing work, deep sea and otherwise. And I think we are very frustrated because we see a lot of summits take place and we're just following the lead of the EU rather than getting solidarity with these other countries that are less developed, that are the producers of this raw material. And, you know, find ourselves where we're just maybe following along with the EU to save ourselves. I mean, we have to remember tuna and the fisheries during COVID was the only way in which we're staying afloat. Yeah. So, if we can diversify our economy, if we can work with our regional partners, then we can put ourselves out of this trap that we find ourselves with these large countries, large companies. But as long as we just keep going along to their tune, we will never find ourselves out of it. And it will be easy for us to say, oh no, we're just small. We're only doing what we can. It's about,
Is that realistic? Do you think that is something that could happen?
support is needed. I think that's the thing. Small boats, small countries, like Seychelles, we have only X amount of people, X amount of time, X amount of resources. There needs to be a strategic national vision saying this is what we want for this, and this is how we're going to get it. And we're not just going to make enemies of the EU, they're going to be part of this.
Yeah.
We're going to make friends with maybe NGOs in other countries that would actually put pressure on the European Parliament. We're going to really work with other governments in the region to come up with a fair deal. And I think these are the leadership questions that we need to bring forward to, whether it's SFA, whether it's the Blue Economy and Fisheries Department. These are the things that we were like, well, what is the vision for fisheries in the next 10 years? How are you working with our regional partners? How are we basically ensuring that, we're following the science? Because right now we're not following the science. And right now, I think if you ask most people that attend these conferences, especially the observers who are NGOs, they're very frustrated because, what is being asked of certain countries and what is being followed is kind of undermined by other countries that are, allowing these things to happen. And you can see recently, with the quotas that was put on, Seychelles was easily able to argue and say, no, we're not agreeing with this. So when we want to make noise, we can make noise. Yeah. And we have to ask ourselves, is that for the benefit of the EU or is it the benefit of Seychelles and others like it?
And is it financially motivated or is it environmentally motivated?
Exactly. I mean, good finance these days has to have good environment. It's crazy to me, right? It's like you want to have these fish for the next 10 years or 100 years, right? And it's always funny, specifically with plastic pollution. They dump in all this stuff, and in the years to come, it's not just killing the fish, but it's the same stuff that will get caught up in your nets, get caught up in your propellers. And you're thinking, okay, this doesn't make sense as a business, as a model for actual profit, because you're killing your main source of revenue, your only source of revenue.
It seems like there's no thought for that future.
It's a race.
Yeah.
Tragedy of the commons. And I don't think, and that's where governments meant to come in, and other governments, and we have the international organizations. I mean, in our region, there's the Commission for the Indian Ocean, and COE. They're meant to be playing more of a role, I think. And again, that's governments sitting around together. And we talk about deep sea bed mining or oil spills. There's transboundary issues that one government alone cannot do it. Several governments, several NGOs, several companies, partners need to really agree and follow up. And for me, after the fellowship I'm taking, my main focus is a master's on maritime security. And I see maritime security for Seychelles as pinnacle. Because not just for the geopolitics, but if we want to talk about fisheries, or if we want to talk about drugs, if we talk about environmental protection, we need to survey what's out there and use the very limited resources to go and fix those problems, whether it's on Astove or Assumption, whether it's a wash or middle of the ocean or in the joint maritime area. We'll need to be able to survey this and then be able to send out some form of intervention, some form of enforcement.
And that's actually really interesting because there is a ban on spearfishing for locals, but we do know that certain, I will not mention which vessels, do go to the outer islands, to places like Aldabra and Assumption and Saint-Joseph. And
I mean, for Aldabra, for our case, not that I've seen or heard, in terms of, it's a huge place, but the team we got out there, 99.9%.
They go with their scuba gear, they fill up their boats with fish that they just catch. I've seen videos that are very disturbing.
I think that's the thing. If there are videos, if there are ways in which we can basically bring this evidence forward, and it doesn't.
No one wants to because it's just too.
If that's
too
the first
risky.
time, that's the first time I'm hitting for Aldabra, but it applies for everything, and I think it's.
Well, around that area, yeah.
I mean, but that area is huge, right? I mean, the new Marine Spatial Plan means that Aldabra's protected area is the size of Luxembourg right now.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit bigger than Mauritius' landmass. Big problem to try and manage it, but we need some kind of feedback mechanisms because we know the region from Comoros, Madagascar, we've had poaching, but if we know from within our own jurisdiction, we really need some kind of communication. We need some kind of, and there are ways to complain, but then are people trusting those ways to not only see justice, but also for them not to be hurt by that, right? You can stick your neck out and be hurt by doing
And
the right
it's
thing.
also people that bring the country a lot of money.
So there you go.
Do
So
that.
one rule for one rule for others.
That's it.
I think, and it goes back to that question about, local fishermen versus international companies or big fish, if I can
Yeah.
put it this way. I think what we need is the leader by example, the leadership by example. And I think we need to expect better from our local fishermen because, again, it goes back to their
Yeah.
survival. And as long as they see it, they will basically be able to own that. But we cannot expect them not to be angry. And I hope they're the ones actually that can speak up a lot more about the tuna industry because it does affect them. And I think maybe as someone who's seen as a tree hugger, as an environmental conservationist, it's all about save the turtle, leave it alone.
Yeah.
But coming from no, this is my livelihood, it's threatening my livelihood. The government has no recourse but to listen and follow what these people are saying. And I think their voices
Need to be heard.
Yeah, they need to be heard, they need to be taken. I mean, there's a whole again, I look at the dredging that's happening on Slow Motion, and I ask myself, who is that really for? Is it really going to benefit the people there? I know certain associations have come forward and claimed this is what they want, but I'm like, does this really actually work for the long term? Is this the best way that this could be done? And it's a shame. It's a shame when you do see there's one rule for one and another rule for others.
And that we bend over backwards for certain people.
Yeah, two rules. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's not the way to operate, and it's happened too long. And if we have real change, then we need to see it in these things. It needs to be unacceptable.
Yeah, and do you think politically right now we are headed towards more transparency and towards that positive change? What are your feelings about the political climate in Seychelles now?
I think, people, especially from 2016, the cohabitation of government, there was a lot more questions being asked, a lot more transparency. And I think the current government, at the time it was in opposition, did a good job to question and not let things go. And we're seeing now with the case of $50 million. That was something that was there before, and we're hearing about it now. We're starting to see evidence, we're starting to see things. And where we'll go, we don't know. But I know that whether it's the EU or whether it's others, there's been a lot of investment and support given to this, because alone, it's very hard. In terms of your question, in terms of more transparency, I think we are heading towards more transparency. But if we're just expecting people to do these things and not demanding for it, like the opposition did.
Yeah.
You see, if there's nobody constantly trying to do that, why will people push and push? You need to wear the crown of some level of uncomfortability. We need young people, all sorts of people who know what they know, sticking their neck out, unfortunately, and maybe also getting hurt, because that's what previous governments have happened to them. Yeah.
That's hopefully slowly the point of the podcast, just having conversations and seeing what comes up and maybe eventually lighting some kind of spark, because it is interesting to see where the country's going. We are in a really interesting time. What do you think the intentions of this new government is or are? Do you think that the intentions, how do you think they want to develop the country and the economy? What is their main focus? Is it hotels, tourism?
I mean, it's always interesting to go back to the manifestos put forward, and I think there could be a lot more detail given to things. I know things like, the Ministry of Agriculture was meant to be its own thing. Instead, it got combined with environment and climate change, and maybe that works in certain ways. I mean, I think what I'm happy to see is the Seychelles that is coming out of the pandemic in a better way than maybe it would have. So I think that's great. I think the focus on drugs is quite interesting, and how we try and create a more professional policing service, and I think there's a lot of work to be done there. In terms of the corruption case that's going on now, that is a positive development so far, because I think it's just necessary. It's terribly toxic and personal and really a shame. But that's the country we live in, and if we really want to see change, maybe we need to address these things, because perceptions or facts are flying all the time in this country.
Yeah.
And we need, some kind of official record on this. I mean, the Truth and Reconciliation process.
Yeah.
This 50 million, all this kind of stuff is stuff maybe 20 years ago we could have never seen.
Of course.
And so all these things tell me that, yes, there's going to be this push and going forward with things, but it's going to be...
No! Sorry.
It's going to be active citizens, going, and it's not just protesting. It's about reading those really boring documents and making films or making songs or making whatever out of them and saying this is now accessible to various people. And it takes a lot of energy. Again,
it does.
Places like South Africa, they have 60 million people and all sorts of different people coming in and out. We really need to look at who's around and who's keen, and make sure those people who are keen aren't just you can do stuff for 5 years and then you give up because there's no support or because you're just exhausted. And I think that's the thing. We need to find communities of people that are willing to feed each other information, feed each other passion, feed
And
each
also
other support.
being mindful of who we're cutting deals with and what we're getting in return, or I mean, what we're giving for those said
We need to
deals.
ask questions. I mean, well-placed questions shouldn't hurt anybody, and they could be answered. I mean, I always wonder, we look at the Seychelles deal and things we've managed to save that airline. But
Yeah.
I'm always, and a lot of people come to me and say, but how did we manage this? How good was our negotiation? Was there anything else given, that we don't know about? And that's not for me to know at this stage.
Yeah, of course.
But I would like to ask these questions. I would like to hear about how can we actually get these deals. And I think, you look at certain developments of properties and hotels, and you think, well, how many actually publicly accessible or beaches that are natural are left to Seychelles? So, there's a lot of hearsay, a lot of perceptions, and these things won't go away. They won't increase, but will they lead to action is the question, and will we just allow these things to happen? And we need to question, and then we need to, I think, whether it's in the courts or whether it's in other places, in the ballot box, we need to really show people we're either happy with what's going on or we're unhappy with what's going on. And it's not just we'll complain and what should happen.
Yeah, understandably. I actually want to ask you, going back quickly, do you know if there's any plans for Assomption? If there's anything happening there, any development, anybody that we're collaborating with for development there?
The previous administration made it loud and clear, need one small base, And I agree that there needs to be some kind of form of enforcement out there. The whole scandal and the whole plans and everything that came out, means that we don't have a lot of trust out there.
Yeah.
And we should be, again, questioning. So I think the onus is on the current government to be like, here's a plan for this place. We're either going to do something that we're not. And these are the reasons. So I think it's still somewhat early days, but there should be visions and intentions already.
Yeah.
And how much are they captured in documents and official things? I don't know. It's a case of national security as well. We all know that a lot of people in Seychelles, I don't know about the majority, but a significant portion, were very concerned and did not want to see a foreign power have access to our islands in ways that we wouldn't. And I think this is something that should be in the minds of anybody in power now. But I think we will always need international cooperation and support.
Absolutely.
And we'll need to think about how we work with multiple partners to achieve things, and how we will not upset certain partners, because it's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
And it's only going to get tougher as we go. So in terms of Assumption, I am unaware of any of the current plans or anything like this, but I hope to see some kind of presence out there that is really in the control of Seychelles and being supported by our international partners in a way that places like Aldabra, if there are things like spearfish fishing going on, or illegal poaching, or things like where you need to evacuate people off an island because of things like tsunamis or cyclones, there is that ability to do that.
And do you know anything about the developments or the possibility of developments on Côte d'Ivoire and Île Plate as well?
Again, I'm not sure. I know IDC had an annual report out for 2020, and I think maybe I had not managed to read all of it, skimmed through a bit. I think that's the thing. I think it would probably be a case of going to Coast Guard and being like, look, this is a question for Assumption, what is the deal? Going to IDC, what is the deal for this? And I think we do have the Freedom of Information Act, I think, where we can use that. And I don't know how many times this has been used, but all these government agencies, departments, have a responsibility to, within due course, answer these questions to the best of their ability. And I advise people to do that. I find myself too busy with other things.
Of course.
But I haven't used it, and it's a shame that I haven't had the chance to use it. But I do plan on asking questions and getting reasonable answers.
Yeah, and I guess we all have to find a way to ask questions in a way that works for us. For me, it's doing little interviews with people and finding out things that I'm really interested in, that I think, is interesting for more people to get involved in as well and know about. So in terms of the future generation of Seychelles, do you think that we are headed in a direction that's going to be beneficial for them? Or do you think we're headed to a place where it's going to be mostly about luxury tourism, fishing, and selling off most of our beautiful, pristine land to international buyers?
COVID-19 gave us a little break from that. I think if we hadn't had COVID and we had carried on with that growth, we'd have had 500,000 tourists by now each year.
Yeah.
Easily. And you could start seeing when cruise ships were on Pana, it'd be impossible to get any space. And it's not to say we don't need this money and stuff, but then at what cost does it come to our access to our natural assets? These things are hurt by having too many people. There's a carrying capacity to these things, but we don't know what those are.
But in terms of cruise ships, does a lot of the money from the cruise ships actually come into the country?
Internationally speaking, cruise ships are, and from an environmental perspective, are some of the worst blights on the tourism. It's great not to have them as a consequence of COVID-19 as much, and I think we had a 2-year ban at one point. And I think you can have smaller vessels that bring a lot more, because again, we're talking about mass tourism, and cruise ships show that. And I think we've always said, and Seychelles always needs to try and do this, is we're not about mass tourism. We should be about more luxuries, should be more special, and it takes a great amount of CO2 to reach us. So the more people that come in and bring in an impact, the worse it is. And you can still see a massive impact with someone with their 500-foot yacht, not to say they're... But if we're going to sell things, should we get our best value for buck, In terms of this generation, I remember growing up on the south and the west and coast and in the south, so from Grand-Anse down to places like Belazar, and I always remember going to Petit-Anse as a very young kid, and the first time I snorkeled was there, and there was no hotel there. It was, it's still the powdered beach, but a lot more life, a lot more, what's the word, you didn't feel watched. You felt very much left alone in the wilderness down south, right?
I experienced that growing up on Pralin as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe it's Raffles in your case, but in my case, Four Seasons came, and I remember at the age of 10, 14, whatever, going to the same beach with a friend by a boat because it was harder to get to the road access to the beach.
You have to go through the hotel.
Exactly. Now. And at the time, I remember just sitting on the beach and just having someone constantly watched us the whole time, and I was like, this is, maybe it was the hair, maybe it was the nationality, the skin color, whatever it was, but you didn't feel welcome in this. And there's places like Anse-Capucin where there's a big issue about that being sold and how people have access to that beach and people trying to prevent people to go there.
Grand Police,
yeah, all these places. I mean, Asamush again, it's how do you feel accessed? How do you feel justice? Because these are your assets and these have been taken, but do people realize that? Are people staying indoors? A lot of people I go hiking with aren't necessarily born Seychellois.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people who are doing these things, but we really need to go out and take it because others are going to take it. And that's not a problem if they're willing to share and look after it. That's the way it should be. But if they're now going to keep it to themselves and throw us out of it, that's a whole thing we really don't want. And you do see University of Seychelles with people like Sir Terence Bell. There's other people who are great, Dr. Liet. There's a lot of interesting Seychelles scientists and people that, from the environmental side, they're investing in young people, and these people are going into government, going into NGOs, bolstering up.
Oh, amazing.
So with the environmental science, I think there are some really good case studies of people going in and doing a difference. With maritime school as well, yes, there are people just going for skipping on tourism, but also ending up skipping in conservation as well. So there are different avenues people can get to that. But the trick is whether it's STA, Maritime, University of Seychelles, we should all be teaching some level of sustainability.
Yeah.
There should be, doesn't matter, you should not be focusing on one or the other. That same line should exist across the board. And in my case, I think, we're talking about the next generation. With the Global Shapers thing we did, the Environmental Youth Leadership Program, we wanted to get 60 young people between the ages of 11 and 20. We had the first batch just done now, 11 to 14, and then the next batch is maybe 15, 16, all the way up to post-secondary. But people come from different backgrounds, where family issues, societal issues, we have a huge drug issue. So these things are more... Yeah, education. So these are more immediate concerns to them. That when you're asking about, maybe the jellyfish tree, which is one of the world's rarest trees, why would they necessarily care about that if they worry about the cost of living, about domestic abuse, or any of these things, right?
And exactly, that feeds into trying to preach sustainability to people who are trying to survive and also see all these really unsustainable developments popping up all over the island.
And that's the sadness of it. Is the key to a lot of what should resolve these issues is the environment, this gift that we've been given, because it's not just a place, it's a leisure place and relaxation place. But if you look at what tour guides are able to make in terms of showing people around, and if you see what scuba divers or big game fishing or even fly fishing, on places like Astove, people are paying $14,000 a week to go fly fishing in our waters, and we've got some of the world records for bonefish and other things. And so there are a lot more ways in which we don't have to work as a waitress or waiter
Yeah.
or anybody in a hotel stuck in, but we can go out there and make our own businesses or even have our own hotels. And I think these are the things, is like the money should be staying in Seychelles with the people who are going to live here and who are going to think for the long term. Even if a hotel's here for 25 years, that's short term. They've made their money, they go, somebody else comes in, and they're always looking to, you know, what's the word, make more money by basically reducing the amount of investment. So the people who live here and stay here, they're going to be better custodians. And the current government, again, it's about where do we put our where do we put our efforts to get people to be the best custodians of this natural place? Because I think the current generation, and I think we're seeing this, and in our lifetime, we've seen so many things disappear, so many things that we've taken for granted just gone.
I remember growing up diving around Pralin and Mahe, these islands. It's completely changed. I know obviously it's because of El Nino as well
so many
as, you know.
But that's the thing. There's external things and then there's internal things. So my gripe that I would say with, we need to hold the big polluters, the big countries come and say, no, stop this, but also help us fix this. But at the same time, we cannot be selling off our resilience. We cannot be destroying mangroves or making way for hotels that are going to allow for, you know, flooding to take place or reduce our resilience, because that's on us to maintain that as much as possible.
And how do we stop it when our government are the ones who are pushing for it and finding loopholes? And
so again, for politics, it's always going to be at the voting, but it's going to also be people standing up and putting certain things forward, and parties coming forward saying this is what the people want and we believe in that and we'll bring that forward. So that's key. So it's not just voting, but it's also running for office and, you know, asking questions and these things. So that's key. That's something our generation will have to really consider and move on, because a lot of people talk about it, but, you know, it's all about finding the team, finding the trust to do things. And I think the environment is coming strong because we're not just seeing it from that tree hugger place, but we're seeing it as our children's and grandchildren's, you know, it's our legacy to them, right? So
and it feels like a constant fight.
It shouldn't be that way.
It's constantly a fight. Whoever's in power, it's another fight, you know, because things end up working in similar, they work in similar ways.
So that goes back. Are we changing the game, or we keep playing the game?
Yeah.
Are we trying to change the game is the question, because are we always going to be a place where tourism and fisheries are the only two things I have? Or are we going to try and look into other things? And, you know, maybe there is a limit. Maybe there's structural realities we need to come to terms with and grow up, right? And say, well, actually, we have to be very exploitative and stuff. I don't believe in that. I think the science and a lot of things show that's not only bad, but necessary and short-sighted. There are alternatives. And I think we need to invest maybe 5, 10, I don't know how much each year, saying we're going to dig ourselves out of these holes rather than dig ourselves deeper, and making this harder for people like us to live, and, you know, whoever comes afterwards to live, because they will be placed in situations they cannot get out of. If we can't get out of this situation, the next generation is just more, it's just a worse situation for them. But I think, you know, there are things like, there are lots of NGOs that exist in this country. We don't need to we don't need to reopen. There's many people that I think are aging out, even dying, that they need they need people to listen to them, learn what they've learned, don't repeat the mistakes they've taken, and really take that forward. I think we're going to miss out on some of the, I would say, conservation heroes and people because we do have an amazing legacy, but it'll be hollowed out if we just like on Facebook and not actually go and start planting the trees, or, you know, going out to learn the species name or whatever it is. So there's so much knowledge there that I think if we don't, in the next 5-10 years, grab onto it and record it and understand it, we will lose that capacity to keep what we have,
to nurture
and grow it. Nurture it. So I don't know how you feel about it, but
I completely agree with you, definitely. And I'm not sure where I stand. I mean, my perceptions over the last 2 years especially have just shifted quite a lot, and right now I'm in a place where I just really want to understand a little more what's happening, instead of just being in a place of complaining about it. And also trying to figure out what difference I can make and how I can make that difference, what's realistic, you know?
I mean, going on that if I can, because I always remember one of the lecturers saying, the problem is there's so many policies, and he was speaking from a German context, but also talking to a group of people from the Global South. He was saying the problem is a lot of people just going into the policy making, into the decision making. We need actual business people to go out and start applying these solutions. So whether it's renewable energy, whether it's sustainable tourism, we need people to actually, instead of going into the government, going into NGOs, they need to become business people And I think when we talk about this solution-oriented moving from complaining, I think we need to ask ourselves, our clients, the people in the world who are coming, whether they're buying our fish or whether they're buying our experience of living in the country, what do they want? And if we can tell them, we're willing to provide you something that's going to be good not only for yourself, but for the planet.
Yeah.
If you're not just going to get this all-inclusive package horrible deal where you don't leave a hotel. And we need to track those people. We need to say we don't want people who don't care about our environment. We want people who care about environment. We want people who care about Seychelles culture. And we've shown, there's been great stances right now where UNESCO has recognized Mutia. There's a lot of chances for us to, get that culture, because that's going to be key to how we... I mean, I've gone to hotels where, you see Mutia done, but it's only performative. We don't do it in our own families or communities. It's hard to dance it for most people, I think, unless you have a teacher or whatever, So I think that's the thing. We need to say that the kind of people who are consuming our products are demanding a particular type of product. Like, it's going back to those fishermen. They need to be the ones who are calling out the hypocrisy more, because the government can stand on no feet as long as those people are showing them that the science and issues are there. Same thing if you're a tourism provider and you're saying, look, I'm a sustainable business. How is this hotel allowed to dump? How is this hotel allowed to get away with these things? I'm doing all the things. And these should be applauded and supported and then replicated by the government.
When you talk about the fishermen, they should be the ones to stand up. I completely agree with you, but I feel like a lot of the fishermen are in a place where they're really just focused on surviving.
Mm-hmm. They can't be doing it alone. Well, that's the thing. It's about strategy, right? It's about saying there's X amount of fishermen who want to talk about this, but why aren't they talking about it? Having those conversations internally, and then saying, okay, well, you may not have X amount of time, but we want to do something with you and bring things forward. So they need to be supported by the community who wants to see them heard, and not just for that community's benefit, but for everybody's benefit, right? We're talking about Seychelles in that sense. So I think it's, we and I see it with young people all the time. Young people are sent aboard for these conferences. It all looks like thumbs up. It's all a nice show. And then meanwhile, the next day an oil pipeline is approved or whatever, and it's just very hollow. And I think the onus and pressure is put on the young people to make it, bring the hope and stuff, but the actual actions don't happen. And I think we're living in times where, again, those who are in power feel pressure a little bit. I think they, again, from whether it's their voters, whether it's the taxpayers or the business people that need certain, clients coming in, so many decisions that if we show the, how the sausage is made, the nasty,
the production.
Exactly. If we go behind the scenes and say, dude, this is actually what's taking place, you might want to put a label on it and say this is all whatever, but that's not the case, and we're going to show you that. I think the drug issue in Seychelles, the reason it's been allowed to get so bad is because we didn't want to put it out in the news. We didn't want to make a story out of it, and eventually it comes out. And I've had friends from Germany ask about the heroin epidemic and say, where did it come from? And I'm like, it was only spoken in Creole on the news, or it was only said in a particular way so that you wouldn't be scared off. And I think that's the thing that needs to change. We need to understand and practice this speaking truth to power a lot more.
Yeah,
we still haven't figured that out, I think. Well, but that's the thing, I think I've realized I keep wanting to turning up to certain things nationally and internationally. And you realize if people stop turning up and it's just an empty room.
But then we're still paying for it.
We're still paying for it, but I think that's the thing. It's about sometimes just being silent in the room and attending. It takes several times, right? You want to still have hope for these things, right? But I think it's about alternatives, because you want to find people who are saying things and then following up. And I found myself in a situation I've said many things and I'm like, whoa, I need to catch up. And the worst thing is letting people down. But you can see exactly there are some people who expect and rely on letting people down, whether it's, the public or particular groups. And I don't know, I think because it's so personal, people don't want to rock the boat too much.
And because everybody knows everybody in such a small community.
So we have to figure that out,
yeah.
I think. I figured out in some ways, but in other ways it's impossible because you...
And you will be penalized.
Yeah. I guess for me the best things I've seen are from distancing yourselves from the people who want to waste your time.
Yeah.
And finding the people, being selective if the people...
Building a community, yeah. And that is something that's definitely lacking here, I think.
It's something that you always see a little bit of rise and a fall, but never going beyond a certain point.
There's little bubbles of communities, but we've yet to see a really strong community of different-minded people who come together and still are able to disagree and support each other.
This is
And
key. The ability to disagree. I think some people, that's it. The disagreement happens and the conversation's over, and you realize, no, we're still trying to get to the same ends most
yeah,
times. But
find a
maybe we
solution,
find a different way.
a
Yeah.
compromise, hear each other out, know what's on the other side, even if I don't necessarily want to look at that side.
I was going to ask you in terms of, taking on this role in that sense. Do you feel you'll have people who will listen to things like this and then be able to find others, I guess? Because that's a key part of this, right? That you've put your perspective out, then the idea is hopefully you get more people coming forward, I guess.
Yeah, coming forward eventually. At the moment, I'm just reaching out to people that I find have something interesting to say and have knowledge that I don't have, and just starting to have these sorts of conversations, and hopefully, yes, building a community of people who do want to speak openly. I'm not sure of the direction of it yet, but I really want to keep it open, authentic, honest, and I want to ask questions. I also want to be in a place for myself, as you say, a bit selfishly, where I am more informed, because I have been quick to judge, especially the political situation and certain people, and I want to be able to change my mind and see a different...
See the data, see
yeah,
the science,
exactly.
see the explanations.
And also understand and have empathy for someone who sees it in a completely different way. Yeah, absolutely.
I totally agree with you. I think that's the thing. The more people put their necks out, the more you realize it's normal and it shouldn't cost you, right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't be living with, like I always say, it's like
Fear.
this tortoise where you see like they put the neck out and then suddenly
Yeah.
ready to put it back. You should be able to walk around and be, this is a democratic free society.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as I've got the facts and I'm not accusing people of things of,
Yes,
crazy
exactly.
things. I should be able to speak my mind. And I think that's happening. But we have to own it.
What do you think has to change in Seychelles? What would you change if you had a magic wand?
The magic wand. I mean, there's probably several things. I think the current, I'm very frustrated with that thing when you talk about for show,
Yeah,
performative, whether it's our culture, whether it's environment.
keeping up with appearances.
Keeping up, exactly. Mrs. Bouquet, Mrs. Bucket. It's exactly that. It's so toxic. It's so...
Hypocritical.
Exactly, inauthentic.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't want to go to places and... I want to go to places and be like, this is true. This is real. I don't want to go and be like, but.
Yeah.
Because I am saying but. I know I'm not going to be like, it's all la la la
Yeah.
and then everything's cozy. No. I think that's the trick. It's about being able to say, look, whether it's a young person, old person, government, whatever, NGO, I want people to really engage with that this is their country, this is their future, this is their thing. Not we're so passive sometimes.
Yeah.
And we don't have to get angry and aggressive. But we do need to get passionate about what's ours and what we're losing on what we could gain. Because it's not just what we're losing. We're also losing opportunities as we go along, right? And I think that's what people should be getting frustrated about. Because a lot of times, again, I've had a chance to live in somewhere like South Africa with a lot more complicated issues than us, if I have to say.
Yeah, of course.
Different, but and you can just see where we have opportunities that others don't. And we do have a lot of challenges, but we do have ways in which we can pull each other up. So I think we need to realize that what we have is something that we can't take for granted. I think a lot of people are realizing this, and I hope that people are more able to go forward. We need to be able to stand up to those who are bigger. It's going to be hard. It's going to maybe take 15 or 20 attempts before anything actually happens. So I think that confidence, that let's take it on attitude is needed. That leadership by example, I think we do have leaders, but they're being used up maybe. There's maybe time for more people to come up and show that they can actually achieve things with a team, and not just for the glory of one person, but for everybody in that sense. A team that manages things. So I don't know, it's a case of that self-realization, self-actualization.
And taking responsibility. And how do
Exactly.
you think we can, in our own little way, take more responsibility to be more mindful, more sustainable, more aware of...
Informed. It's
inform
that
ourselves.
I can never read all the documents, so just in the environment, let alone everything. We need to read, we need to question, we need to seek. And the more you inform ourselves, the more, if you care about it, maybe you get so disaffected by it and pull out. But I think the more we read, share the information, be like, no, this is actually what it said here. And, whether it's the Victoria Master Plan of 2040, which nobody knows about.
Yeah.
Or there's so many good things on paper or things that we were promised on paper. that we have to be like, is this still happening? Like the assumption case, you know?
Yeah.
We need to be like informing ourselves and then going to the people who are responsible, like, either you know what this is or you don't. If you don't, why don't you? And if you still don't know why you don't, why are you still there?
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. Once we inform ourselves and engage with these things, people have less and less excuses to turn us away. And I think that needs to get to a critical mass. Maybe we'll never get to a point where everybody's informed, but maybe X amount of people are, and then they start choosing one issue at a time to basically show that there's an issue here and we need more. Because I think what happens so much, and I'm definitely responsible, definitely it happens to me, where you spread yourself so thin and then you're not effective. So you need to choose your battles, I think. This is key. You need to be informed and choose where, for this year, I'm going to do that, or for this amount of time, this project is all I've got. Maybe you can do a couple, but not to the point where nothing ends up happening, which I've been close to.
Me too. Burnout, trying to take everything on and everyone on.
That mental health, right? You need to create that space for yourself and say, okay, I will fight another day because I'm not going to die on this mountain.
It's so critical for any development of our country. We cannot develop anything if we don't develop our own minds.
You need to take care of it. I've definitely been in cases where it was because of what you want to do, you get passionate about it, but then you realize for 3 months, 4 months, you've only had 4 hours of sleep. And then you realize, wait, did I always have the best ideas to solve these issues? Yes, they might have figured themselves out, but was my brain in the best place to really understand what was going on and choose a different recourse or follow a particular form of solutions? So I think that's, it's a long-term realization for me. But I think as a country where we're so small and there's only so many people, burnout and just running through people. I mean, if I was in the Department of Environment, there's so much going on that to stay on top of it, to be, any department, it's very hard because there's so much demands being put on people.
So is there any other information or anything important that you would like to share with people from your side?
I mean, in Seychelles, I think nothing specifically. I think it goes back to that kind of magic wand. Maybe that's kind of where my head's still at.
Yeah.
There isn't going to be someone coming up to do it
for us.
Yeah. There's no. I mean, we've lived in a time when people were more than happy to manage things and benefit for themselves. Maybe it's time for us to be like,
take our power back.
Yeah, exactly. Let's not wait for others to give it to us. Let's not
to save us.
Exactly. There's no Marvel. It's not the Marvel universe here. So we need to see ourselves as maybe not the best, but maybe the only things we got, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's not enough. But we will either live in a time where we're better off because of what we've done, or we'll be worse off because of what we've not done. And I think, it starts with taking a hike. It starts with, you're doing the small things where you appreciate what's around you, and then you'll know that you don't want to let that go. And there's so much potential that I think if people start realizing that the world wants to see them succeed, actually. Because I think if we talk about class or people putting each other down, we will find that there are more people actually keen for you to succeed than others. And the minority might be vocal, but it's definitely worth forgetting about it. I know someone like Isham Raf, another really great character, I think, in terms of music, but also just general living. Yeah,
he's the whole family.
Exactly. This they've stolen everybody's talent and put it together. But I always remember before I came to Seychelles, it gave me a lot of hope about coming, because I really didn't want to come back. I was in Cape Town. It was a lot of things, but it was anonymous living. It was, culturally, nightlife, whatever. Yeah. The conversation was having freedom. There was a whole different vibe. But I remember it was on state TV, which was being done, and he had this one thing is, don't be afraid to run after the bus. And even if you don't catch the bus and people laugh at you, you're getting better at it. You need to try. And I think that's what a lot of people don't do. They don't try because they're too afraid to fail. And that's a legitimate fear, but
that's so true. Yeah. And that's so global as well.
Yeah, it's not just Seychelles. Yeah, that's for sure.
But we feel like we're under the magnifying glass.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. We need to be brave enough to say those things might be in our head or real, but we're going to do it, and we're going to address those things as we go along. I think a lot of planning, a lot of strategy. I'm a big strategic person, so I always like we have this aim, but how are we actually going to get there? And some people just have ideas without necessarily thinking those through. We need to be prepared to. That's that's good as well, though. But it's exactly that. It's you need to come back to it and be like, this is how I'm going to.
And not being afraid of failing. And that's something I learned over this COVID has really shown me that, okay, I've failed, but keep
Right.
keep moving
It's a
forward.
lesson, right?
Yeah,
You've
absolutely.
got all those. There's no. I mean, that's thing again, conservation or anywhere. People are afraid to report on the failures because you got X amount of money, and they're like, "Well, what happened? No, 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 it
Yeah.
was perfect." And then you're like, "No, no, no, this went wrong," and then tell the other person not to do that
Yeah.
instead of everybody.
Falling into the same trap for keeping up with appearances.
Exactly. I think for us, this time right now is so crucial, special, and full of potential. And potential can be bad and good. We have to realize that. My journey in the last 4 years or so being back in Seychelles is not one I expected to go on at all. I'm very lucky, feel very privileged, but I also know that it's one that I think it should be seen as anyone can do it. I honestly think that there's been a lot of support given to me, but I've also been able to approach people and get them on my side as well. So I think it's about going out there and saying, okay, this is me, and maybe strategically as well, but
Yeah.
finding those people who are willing to support you, making those teams. And for me, the biggest message is that we are really in an opportune time to try things. And I've tried a lot, succeeded sometimes, failed a lot too, but it's always been that case where building a community, building understanding has brought me forward. And I think, in Seychelles where we talk about blue economy, we need people to just take out people and go snorkeling and swimming so that they can actually see what's under the water.
Yeah.
When we call this nature, we need people to take people hikes. We're saying how many people actually enjoying the nature. If we just forget about getting to the big policy things and just getting the people to go outside and experience this nature that is feeding us, really, that's going to be the way. So I think we need to really ask our visitors, ourselves, to go out there, try things, businesses, just relaxation leisure things that are in touch with nature in sustainable ways, and not be afraid to then share these ideas, share these challenges, failures, successes,
Yeah.
whatever it is, so that community can then replenish yourself and grow. I think that's something again, 4 years here, I'll be away for maybe a year or 3 years. I'll miss it terribly, but I want to come back to a country where I know there's so many different people trying things.
Yeah.
And it'd be cool to just hear how people have fared.
Giving the people, or also growing the confidence to be okay with not being perfect, not being airbrushed. It's tricky.
Yeah, the most exactly. If you see someone really saying some good stuff, then they care a lot more about what's being said than maybe what's happening. A lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people who do things, they never talk.
Yeah, it's so true.
Which is a problem sometimes.
Yeah.
But you can see where they're going for it.
Yeah, it's true, because there is still that fear of being victimized in some way.
Yeah, and they just don't want to waste the time sometimes.
Yeah,
They're like,
true.
I've given up on the community, or they're not supporting me, or whatever, they're hurting me, as you're saying, victimized. And so I'm just going to get on and do it.
Yeah.
That can be effective because people will follow that
Yeah.
somehow. They'll hear about it and be like, oh, that's how he got it done. Cool, maybe I can do that. It's
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Figuring it out, because that's all we're doing every day. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you so much, Lucy.